everybody. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. Let's do it. We got 10,000 hotel workers on strike right now. Workers standing up and fighting back. That's always good to see. Because, I know this comes as quite a shock to a lot of you, but it's actually us that has the power if we actually chose to use it, if we actually united, which is why they have to keep us separated. They have to keep us fighting amongst ourselves constantly. That's part of the big reason. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hello to everybody. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. Sorry I had to start an hour late today at 4 p.m. Eastern, but glad to have you here. Please click thumbs up and share and subscribe and all those good things. I'm going to be talking about the hotel strike. I'm going to be talking about other issues affecting workers, poverty in America. Also some updates on Israel and their ongoing genocide. As well as just so much more. I don't know how much I can get to. Hopefully I'll get. Oh, I'm also going to play. It's just a little over a minute long, but Jill Stein's response to AOC's spicy talk yesterday. AOC was so spicy, she said, which means lying her ass off and full of shit. Apparently, that's what spicy is now. But yeah, let's start off though with the hotel workers. And by the way, thank you to all of you who have joined up at patreon.com/Lee Camp. I did a little fundraiser episode yesterday that was close to 2 hours long. If you didn't catch that, where of course we covered a lot of important news. But yeah, so a lot of new members over at the Patreon. Can't thank you enough. New York Times and others are reporting that about 10,000 hotel workers have walked off the job on Labor Day, and it continues today. And it's a Sunday morning. Workers were striking at Marriott, Hyatt, Hilton hotel properties, plus a Fairmont, 8 cities across the U.S., Boston, San Francisco, Seattle, San Jose, Honolulu, Kauai, San Diego, Greenwich, Connecticut, and several more are on the docket to begin strikes soon. Baltimore, New Haven, Oakland, Providence. Unfortunately, though, here in Baltimore, the hotel workers cannot possibly manage to stop as much business as collapsing bridges does. We collapse our own bridges, which just helps, slow everything down, give everybody a break. Couple of days to think about things, think about where we are. Among the issues, the union says it is fighting for higher wages and an end to pandemic era service and staffing cuts. They also are tired of people asking where the coffee is in the lobby. So they're striking for much larger signs that say coffee over there. I made up that last one in case you're humor impaired, but I think so. So this topic, this is a good example of a topic that will get some coverage on mainstream media, right? I'm reading from New York Times. You turn on CNN, you'll see it there. It was even, I noticed, in Voice of America, which is the U.S. government's propaganda radio station. Even they're covering it. And you're like, wow, you'd think the U.S. empire wouldn't want to talk about striking workers. But here's the thing. They don't mind doing it as long as they can avoid it from becoming a thing that's actually spirals into more and more strikes and longer strikes. And if that happens, then you'll see the coverage shift. If it's a day or two, and especially if it's against a corporate entity that perhaps has a little less power over things, such as the hotel network. I mean, they are powerful, but they probably own our government a little less than, let's say, big ag or big pharma or big oil. But anyway, if the strike progresses and grows and workers start uniting and coming in from other areas, not just hotels, then you see the government shift their stance on it. You see the mainstream media begin attacking the workers. You see them start to do the effort, start to lay the pieces, lay the foundation in order to attack and crush these movements. But of course, that's what needs to happen. Workers have been exploited so aggressively and for so long here in the United States, but maybe just in capitalism in general. I don't want to just specify us, that there needs to be far larger strikes, both in terms of amount of time, tactics used. I have enjoyed seeing that there's been kind of a shift in a variety of tactics used, things like rolling strikes, in order, because it's tougher to stop a rolling strike than it is to stop a just kind of straight up strike. Because when there's a straight up strike, generally, often what the corporation does after it's tried the kind of standard practice like infiltration and propaganda against them and stuff like that, they then will just, if it's not enough workers, they'll fire them and they'll go through the trouble of training, scabs or whatever to replace them and things like that. But if it's a rolling strike, it's much more difficult for the company because they're on strike one day and they cost you several $1,000,000, and then they're back the next day, but they say they're going to do it again in a week if you don't give in to demands. And it gets far more complicated. Someone's mentioning a wildcat strike, which wildcat is when the workers decide to strike without the approval of the union leadership. Those are important, very important too, as well, I was going to say, which is when you want to say two, but you want to say it multiple times. Two as well. But those are important also because often, I don't know about often, but some of the time, union leadership has been kind of captured either by their own greed, some humans are greedy, or they've been captured by, they're actually working for industry at that point, and they have a pretty sweet deal, and so they don't actually want the workers to strike because it gets in the way of the deal they've set up. So then the workers need to kind of turn against their leadership and say, no, this is something we stand for, something we want, and that can happen as well. But so that's what a wildcat strike refers to, as far as I understand it. But so, we should all support the hotel workers. And obviously, I hope this keeps growing. And, pretty much all of the large change that's ever come about in our society has come about by a large group of people deciding to unite and change things and not allow the splintering, the fracturing of these groups. And that's where change comes from. So whenever they succeed at getting but you're not a vegan, or but you're religious and I'm not religious, or but you drive a gas guzzling truck and I don't, or when you let the things divide you, I'm not saying you can't discuss those things. Like, sure, try and talk someone out of driving a gas guzzling truck. But if you're going to let it divide you on other issues, like, hey, let's go protest this weapons manufacturer, this that's causing so much destruction. No, I can't protest with you because you're not a vegan. Or then dividing us and that's why the two-party bullshit system is so effective. It's effective at dividing us. I mean, it's just one of the many ways they divide us, but it's incredibly effective at dividing us and making us not unite and making us not work together against the actual puppeteers behind our exploitation, oppression, if you will. But so I want to show this video real quick of this is how tough workers have it right now in America. This happened at a Wells Fargo, and this is how insane wage slavery, just office work in general, has gotten in the United States. And I just want to play this little news clip real quick.
A Tempe Wells Fargo employee died at her desk, and 12 News is now confirming that it may have taken as many as 4 days for anyone in the office to notice. Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us for 12 News at 10. I'm Kariba Devine.
I'm Mark Curtis. It's a story we first reported yesterday. Tonight, Tempe police are confirming the timeline of when the woman clocked in to when her colleagues found the body. 12 News journalist Gabriela Becerra is in the studio with new details tonight. Gabby, 4 days. I mean, this poor woman went 4 days undiscovered. It's hard to believe.
And that's a question many employees are asking themselves tonight. I spoke
4 days dead at your cubicle
with an employee who said that she shared her perspective on the workplace environment, and they say it's a big building, but most people don't work there on a daily basis. A Wells Fargo employee went to work the morning of Friday, August 16th and never went home. Tempe police tell 12 News 60-year-old Denise Prudhomme scanned into work at 7 o'clock in the morning. 4 days later, police responded to the office building near Washington Street and Priest Drive for reports of a subject down. Prudhomme was declared dead.
Anyway, I think this says a few things about our office environment. I feel like it says something about the amount of time people work, but I suppose you could be a light worker and still die at your desk. But it shows how much we've been separated and atomized, how much we just work alone in its silence, and no one even checked on her. No one thought, hey, I'm going to go say hi to whatever her name was. Like, it's just so crazy. Of course, it's a Wells Fargo. I feel like that is important, even though some may say it's not important. Later, I'm not going to play all the report. I don't know how much of it I can play without getting the video taken down. But later in the report, they say some felt that there was a bad smell in the building, but they just thought it was the pipes. It's like no one thought to see what was going on. And then what? This just is a perfect metaphor for how aggressively awful this wage slave system is. And the fact that it happened at a Wells Fargo, just all the better that this is how much Wells Fargo cares for their employees. Also, you have to clock in, right? There's a computer system where you say, hey, I arrived at work. And apparently there's nothing in the computer system that says, hey, this person never went home for 4 days. This person never, if you've got a computer system clocking people in, why would it not notice that? But anyway, and I felt like this was a good segue to just how hard many Americans have it right now. As we're seeing, and of course, to relate this to the larger electoral bullshit right now, as we're seeing two candidates who do not give a tip of a turd about your average worker, about people that are slaving away. So every once in a while, throw a little lip service to it. But for the most part, it's nothing. The closest you'll get is they're both now saying, I think Trump said it first, that they're going to get rid of taxes on tips. And it's like, even if they did that, which I'm sure they won't, but even if they did that, that is beyond nothing for a system that is as exploitative as the capitalist shit show we're in right now. I want to show these from Phil Mandelbaum. He does great work over there on his Twitter and other places. But he put together this some of these stats. 50 million people in America go to bed hungry every night. There are 30 vacant housing units per unhoused person. And I've had numbers close to that. I've mentioned them for a long time, that there's 17 million vacant homes across the entire U.S. Now, if you take the number we're told of how many people are homeless across America, they often say 600, 700,000. Then, you divide that into 17 million and you get close to 30 houses per person. Well, no, you don't. But, but I actually think that those numbers are not quite accurate. So, he's working off of somewhat different numbers, but not that different. I often said there's 17 empty homes and he's saying 30 because I'm actually increasing the amount of homeless that we have in the country, because I don't actually believe it's at 600 or 700,000, because a lot of people are in and out of homelessness. There's a lot of people that might be sleeping on a friend's couch for a week, but are technically homeless, etc. Thank you, Hobo Roadie. Speaking of homeless, thank you, Hobo Roadie, for joining up on YouTube. Anyway, the entire houseless population could be housed for the price of one aircraft carrier. One aircraft carrier could house the entire homeless population. And in fact, in certain ways, it'd be zero aircraft carriers, because in states where they have decided to house the homeless, to give every chronically homeless person an apartment, they've actually saved money. The state has saved money. So he's talking about if you don't count the savings of money and you just look at how much it would cost to house someone. But in fact, it wouldn't even be an aircraft carrier. It would just be, you could do it and get money back housing everyone. 41% of Americans with houses are struggling to keep them. 31% with houses. And that, just to add to that, it's like 60% of Americans can't afford houses. So you have 40% of Americans with houses. And of that 40%, 30% say they're struggling to keep them. This is more than 40% of Americans are facing financial hardship. That's in 2024. And that number has just gotten worse. It's not like things are getting better. 39% 2023, 35% 2022. And, a bar graph just always makes everything much more edible, doesn't it? It makes data more edible. Military contractors can expect $470 billion from the bipartisan budget agreement of 2024. $470 billion. That's just going to military contractors. That's not the entirety of the Pentagon's budget, obviously. The bill adopts Biden's $886 billion military spending request. But if you include black budgets and everything else, everything that's not listed in the military budget, I'm not even sure Department of Homeland Security or NSA or anything's in there, you get well over $1 trillion spent on military and intelligence, which is an unbelievable number. It's a number that just, it'll make pus ooze out your ears if you just try and think about it for a minute. And you don't ask me where the pus comes from. I have not researched that. But $1 trillion, I often mention that if you make $40,000 a year at your job after taxes, then in order to make $1 trillion, you'd have to work for 25 million years. So so if we were to put the Pentagon's budget on one dude, if we were just to put it on one guy named Gary, then Gary would, you just have to check back with him 25 million years from now to see how it was going. You could check back 24 million years from now and just be like, hey, we're getting close. Are we anywhere near it? You only got 1 million years left. So compare this to in 2022, CEOs were paid 344 times as much as a typical worker. 344 times as much as a typical worker. In contrast to 1965, when they were paid 21 times. Can you imagine what it was like back in 1965, where your boss only made 21 times as much as you? It must have just been, you just must have felt like equality. You must have seen your boss and been like, sure, he can drive a Mercedes or whatever, a BMW, but he doesn't have 6 yachts. It just feels so much closer to equality. Only 21 times as much. In 2021, CEOs made nearly 8 times as much as the top 0.1% of wage earners in the U.S. The dramatic increase in CEO compensation during the pandemic is remarkable. CEOs' realized compensation jumped 30.3% between 2019 and 2021. The pandemic was just a bonanza for the richest Americans. Just a bonanza. This does not mean every business did well. A lot of businesses went out of business. I mean, more so mom and pop businesses, but still, a lot of people went out of business. But the richest of the rich, it was a fucking bonanza. Honestly, $4.5 trillion was dumped into Wall Street during the pandemic just to keep things rolling. They increased the U.S. monetary supply, the number of dollars in circulation, by 20%. And as I mentioned many times, although, it still doesn't seem to be catching on. It still doesn't seem like many people are talking about it. If you were to do that in just about any other country, almost any other country, if you were to increase the monetary supply by 20% over the span of a few years, then that currency would be 20% more worthless, or maybe far more than that. It would it would just, the inflation would be nuts. You know, getting a movie ticket would be like $300 or something. But the U.S. doesn't have that problem. We just print all the money we want because the petrodollar keeps the strength of U.S. currency. So while all of that's going on, while 40% of people are in financial straits, barely afford a home, those who have homes, so only 60% of Americans can't afford a home. There's 30 vacant homes for every houseless person, unhoused person. While all that's going on, I haven't seen anybody mention this almost at all. I covered it back when it came out. I don't remember, maybe a couple of years ago. But poverty murders 1,300 people per day in America. 1,300 per day die from poverty. This was a study from the University of California, and it was covered in this Vox article, but it's really not mentioned enough. So if you were to put this on a list of the top causes of death across America, number one, of course, being e-scooter accidents. No, number one being heart disease, 2 is cancer, 3 is smoking. Cumulative poverty, meaning being poor for over 10 years, would be the 4th biggest killer in America. And single year poverty would be the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th biggest killer in the country. And if you add those two numbers together, 295,000 a year plus 183,000 a year, and you divide by the 365 days, you get 1,300 people murdered per day by poverty. Alexander's asking for the link, so I'm going to put it in the chat. But I feel like this is something that should be talked about more. I feel like, and this is one of those things where if you had a legitimate presidential candidate, and I know Bernie Sanders has horrified many people over the past several years, but back when Bernie Sanders was running in 2016, if you had a candidate like that, these are the type of numbers that would be incredibly valuable to be saying constantly, to go up in front of people, to go up in front of the American people and say, 1,300 Americans die per day from poverty. There are 17 million vacant homes across America, while 60% of Americans can't afford a home. These are the type of numbers that should be just repeated and repeated and repeated to get people to understand the utter insanity of this situation. The utter insanity of having our systems set up like this. But we don't have any candidates like that. I mean, in the two parties that the media is allowed to talk about. Obviously, Jill Stein does great on this. Claudia De La Cruz, Cornel West. But of the two parties that will have $1 trillion to spend on their election, you will not hear this stuff mentioned because they don't actually want to fucking do anything about it. If they mention it, they have to then try and do something about it. But they're not going to. Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or Donald Trump or PC Vance or whatever the fuck his name is. No, JD Vance. None of them, they don't want to do anything about it, so they're not going to talk about it. 1,300 people a day. That's similar to the number of people that our police kill per year. Now, the number of people our police kill per year is horrifying. Also, the number of people our police kill per year is actually double 1,300 because Lancet Medical Journal says that roughly 55% of all deaths by police are not put down as deaths by police. Okay. I want to get to, speaking of Jill Stein, I want to get to Jill Stein's, I'm going to play about a minute and a half, Jill Stein's response to AOC. I covered the whole AOC post yesterday, AOC's garbage attack on Jill Stein and how insane it is. And Jill Stein, in her response, says a lot of the things that I said as well. But let's get it straight from her. And just a quick reminder, if you want to support the show, feel free to throw in a super chat or something like that. And whether you're watching live or not, you can click the tip thanks button. If you are watching live and you throw in a super chat, I will get it on the screen for everybody to enjoy or respond to. Anyway, here's Jill Stein.
Board, but very quickly, I just wanted to thank AOC Pelosi so very much for her very authentic concern about.
Did you catch that, AOC Pelosi? Burn, baby.
Growing green power. Clearly, AOC is the attack dog du jour, and the Democrats are running scared, and they should be, because who wants to support a genocide? Who wants to vote for a genocide? And if there's anything that's predatory here, it's saying that your candidate is working tirelessly for a ceasefire when actually they are actively funding and arming genocide and actually refusing to even consider an arms embargo, which would bring the genocide to a screeching halt. AOC, who's supposed to be in leadership of the Democratic Party, it's amazing if she doesn't know about the anti-democratic tactics and strategies that the Democratic Party uses to crush and silence political opposition. They've been hiring an army of lawyers to throw competitors like me off the ballot. They've been hiring infiltrators and saboteurs and publicly posting job advertisements for those positions. They've been hijacking our public funding in order to keep us off the ballot. And they actually impersonated the Greens to throw us off the ballot in 22 in the Senate race for North Carolina, for example. How is that not fraud and election interference? Also, what's predatory here is stealing the signature issue of the Greens. Our Green New Deal launched in 2010, appropriated by AOC as her signature issue in 2018 without a mention of where it came from. So bottom line is, Americans want more choices. We are that choice. We are the one choice, which is anti-war, anti-genocide, pro-worker, climate emergency. Check us out.
So great response from Jill Stein. But I will add a couple of things. She doesn't even mention what I did yesterday, that Jill Stein, while trying to run for president in 2012, was arrested and taken to a chair while at a debate, because that's how much you're allowed to be part of this election process if you're not in the two main parties. She also doesn't mention that when AOC stole the Green New Deal from the Green Party, which it'd be fine if the Democrats stole the Green New Deal and then put forward every plank of it. And I would, if I were, representing the Green Party, I would celebrate that as, look, what we did. We came up with a policy. It was then adopted by one of these two parties that are actually allowed into Congress, and they then did their best to push it forward. If that were the case, so be it. Great. Worth it. But they diluted it to hell as much as they could. They also took out all references to military, which, of course, creating a Green New Deal that's actually green would 100% have to come with massive military reductions, considering the largest organizational polluter in the world is the U.S. military. But anyway, good response from Jill Stein. So I just wanted to play that real quick. And she did mention being the party that is against, or the candidate that is against genocide. And I wanted to play this clip, even though it's in Hebrew. I'll play a little bit out loud so you can get the point. This is one of the people who was a hostage. So she's taken hostage. She's held in Gaza. She's then released in one of the prisoner exchanges. The only one I think the only one that's happened was like a month after it happened, right? In November, last November. But anyway, she's screaming at Ben-Gvir and the Israeli government that he's the reason the hostages are not freed and are being and are ending up dead. And he's the Minister of National Security in Israel. And anyway, she's screaming at him. And after I play a little bit of the audio, I'll read what she's saying in case you're listening to the podcast. But so she's screaming at him that you're a murderer. You won't even meet with me. I sat in a tunnel in Gaza, and you won't even meet with me. And it's because they don't want to meet with them because they don't actually want to save the hostages. That's not actually their goal. Their goal is genocide. Their goal is ethnic cleansing. So you even have former hostages coming forward, and I've read interviews from other ones that former hostages coming forward and saying that it's the Israeli government that is causing the deaths of these Israeli hostages. Now, anytime you say the word hostages, I think you should also mention that Israel is holding 10,000 Palestinian hostages. So let's not forget that, which the mainstream media will never mention. Speaking of this, and the U.S. being dragged, kicking and screaming into this genocide. The U.S. did not want anything to do with this. They just couldn't. They were dragged into this genocide. Someone has put together a bunch of headlines. Sorry. I'm jumping the gun here. This one's actually, that's not the one I want to put up. This one's from Alan McLeod about how our mainstream media always frames it as the U.S. doesn't want to be involved in war. They just end up there. This one's from NBC News, why the U.S. could get drawn into a conflict in the South China Sea that, of course, the U.S. is trying to create. They're not getting dragged into it. This is from another one. U.S. could be drawn into war with Iran, Biden warns. The U.S. does not want war with Iran. It just can't stop it from happening. Here's from Newsweek. NATO will be drawn into war with Russia if Ukraine loses. So, and these are just a few examples, but this happens so regularly where, and if you watch mainstream media, you watch CNN or Fox News, it's all about the U.S. being dragged into this conflict or that conflict. And actually, this is one of my biggest complaints back when, so I'm a bit ashamed to say it, but back when I was like in college and a little after, I would watch The West Wing, the TV show The West Wing. And at the time, I didn't know enough to really be like, oh, that's wrong or that's wrong. If you watch some of it now, you know that it is the liberal view of the world, that the U.S. is just really good people trying to do right and take care of the world. And they don't want to be the world's policeman, but how did we end up here where we're the world's policeman? And that's like what The West Wing is. But one of my biggest complaints was every time there was any kind of international issue, whether it was Israel or Iran or Russia or whatever, China, it was always that the U.S. was just sitting there minding our own business, sitting down to a picnic, just opening a nice little pack of blue cheese and just enjoying the day, nice fall day, leaves coming down, just sitting there. The president and the secretary of state was sitting on the blanket, and enjoying some strawberries, a little bit of cheese, and maybe a glass of sparkling. And then somebody did something that made them have to go and make the world right again. Somebody, China attacked us, or Israel, some Palestinians did something awful in Israel. They bombed a U.S. general. It was every single, never once in that show, whatever season, 7, 8 seasons of that show, did the U.S. do something to another country just like initially. They were never the initiator. They were always just a poor, reluctant bully that was getting poked. Or not the bully, I guess the poor, reluctant big guy that was getting poked by the little tiny bully. And they were just like, stop it. I really just want to help everybody and have a peaceful world. And that's what these articles are all. That's what these headlines all say. Oh, Iran's going to drag us in. Lebanon's going to drag us in. Israel's going to drag us in. They're dragging us. They're dragging us into war. We've been dragged into so many wars. Did you know that Obama's last year in office, he was dragged into dropping 26,000 bombs? Did you know Trump's first year in office, he was dragged into dropping 40,000 bombs? He was dragged into dropping the Moab, the mother of all bombs. He was dragged into assassinating Iran's top general in Iraq, even though Iran wasn't and isn't at war with us. He was just dragged into these things. kicking and screaming. We were dragged into the proxy war in Ukraine. We didn't want to be. We were trying to be good. We were trying to be good. They just wouldn't let us. They just wouldn't let us out. So here's back to Israel for a second. Here's Israeli media and this person has said is near unanimously blaming Netanyahu and Israel's government for the death of the 6 hostages. Most of you probably know 6 more hostages were found dead. It seems like I don't know whether we know for certain how they died, but it seems like they were killed as Israelis, as the IDF was trying to save them or rescue them, but it's tough to know exactly because every time the IDF shoots someone, they say it wasn't them. So who knows what actually happened? But here are some of the headlines in Israel. Reverse Netanyahu reverse. Military pressure does not return abductees. It kills them. A dramatic change for the worse in the abductees' chances of survival. The state of Israel condemns them to death. The claim that only military pressure will bring back the abductees was never true. Now she is unfounded. Chaotic and conflicted management and political considerations rudely invaded our Holy of Holies. Anyway, the point is, Israeli media, and there's been massive protests. I showed you some video of that the other day in Israel against the Israeli government. Israeli media is very frequently saying Netanyahu has caused the recent deaths of these detainees because he's not trying to create a ceasefire. He's not trying to get the hostages back. He just wants to continue the genocide. And yet U.S. media, U.S. Western media, British media, Canadian media, as far as I know, they don't run articles like this. Very few of the articles in U.S. media say this Netanyahu is to blame for these hostages' deaths. And of course, they won't mention that Israel has 10,000 Palestinian hostages that they're holding right now. So I wanted to bring this to you as the censorship continues against anyone who, especially on college campuses, who tries to speak up for Palestinians, speak out against this genocide, that NYU has passed or is passing something new, adding something new to their student conduct policies that would add Zionism to a protected class. Basically, nothing negative can be said about Zionism or Zionists, or it counts as like hate speech, which I'll read from this from Palestine Legal. If implemented, these policies risk creating a hostile environment for Palestinian and anti-Zionist Jewish students and severely curtail the free expression of all students. The policy directly conflates Zionism and Judaism, which are two different things. For one, there's far more Zionist Christians than there are Jews in the world. For two, you can have anti-Zionist Jews like myself, like Jill Stein. And for three, Israel does not represent all Jews. Israel is a nation state with their own nation state policies. And even if they were acting perfectly, even if Israel was the best nation state in the world and cared for their neighbors and was not genociding anyone, they still wouldn't represent my beliefs. They still wouldn't speak for me or all other Jews. So Zionism is not Judaism. I've also played clips of very Orthodox Jews. I think the ones I've played have been Orthodox Jews in New York City, who say exactly what I'm saying. They're anti-Zionists. They believe Israel is harmful to Jews around the world because it makes people anti-Semitic, because they conflate Zionism and Israel with Judaism as a whole. So it actually creates anti-Semitism. That's what Israel does, the state of Israel. To continue from the Palestine Legal, which severely curtail the free expression of all students. The policy directly conflates Zionism and Judaism by stating that the former is a code word for the latter, which it's not. It goes on to treat Zionism as a protected class on its own, a status afforded to no other political ideology, meaning all the other in the in NYU's code of conduct and policies, all the other protected classes are things like Black students or LGBT students. So basically, they're saying, NYU is now saying that defending and being a party to and being excited about genocide is exactly like being born as a Black person. I'll just let you pause and think about that for a second, because that sounds right to me. That just sounds totes woke. That's what that sounds. That's just wokeism at its best. Defending bombs raining down on children, the murder of over 40,000 people, the desecration of cemeteries, schools, the murder of journalists, doctors, UN staff, that defending all that, being excited for that, being outwardly spoken for all of that is totally just like being Hispanic. Is just like being born Black. God, it does suck, because look, if you're born supporting genocide, that's never going to change. Just like your skin color is never going to change. If you're born supporting genocide, it's just what you are forevers. So this is NYU. Exciting to see them really doing this right. Really fighting back for peace and equality and everything else. Okay, I am going to shift gears now to Latin America and talk about new leaked videos and chats that expose decades of U.S. meddling in Ecuador. U.S. has created coups in Ecuador, and more. Please, if you feel like you've gotten 38 cents, just 38 cents out of this show so far, I hope you will join up at leecamp.net, which is my locals page. Scroll down to become a subscriber, or join up at patreon.com/LeeCamp. It's $6 a month, which is 38 cents an episode. And you get all kinds of extra perks. You get both my ebooks, Dangerous Ideas, and Bullet Points and Punchlines. You get my comedy special, Laughing All the Way to the Shitstorm. My Zoom comedy special. You get extra segments frequently. And yeah, I hope you will do that. And if you join up at Locals, you can post your own stuff there. It's a very, very exciting community of awesome, awesome people. Okay, so Grayzone has released secret chats that expose a decade of U.S. meddling in Ecuador. Exclusive interviews and leaked messages reveal how a key ally of the U.S. weaponized the fight against corruption and criminal organizations to selectively prosecute Ecuador's heads of state, viciously persecuting Rafael Correa and his Revolución Ciudadana movement on flimsy evidence, while delaying investigations into much graver crimes allegedly committed by his successors. So this is more proof of lawfare coups. Lawfare, Alfred's asking if I got to my goal yesterday. Yes, we did get to the goal. We had a fundraiser goal of 20 new members, and we did achieve it. Took almost 2 hours, but we got there. Thank you to all you who become members at LeeCamp.net or patreon.com/LeeCamp. But the U.S., the preferable way that the U.S. now coups governments is usually lawfare, or lawfare combined with a few other factors. But they will manufacture, or they'll help prosecutors in whichever government manufacture charges against a left-wing, sometimes leftist, sometimes socialist government that is getting in the way of U.S. hegemony, of U.S. exploitation of the world. And we've seen this again and again. We saw it in Bolivia. We saw it in Ecuador. We saw it in Brazil against Lula. We saw it in Pakistan against Imran Khan. We saw it in Argentina, where they used it against the vice president because they knew she was going to run for president soon, and they manufactured a prosecution against her to make it so that once convicted, she could never run for president, which is exactly what happened. And Argentina is now a far right-wing anarcho-capitalist, I think is what he calls himself. Absolute dystopian shit show. So it's been very successful in many of these places. And some of the time, like in Lula's case, you eventually get a leak that proves the manufacturing of lawfare against a candidate, which is what got Lula out of prison after several years in prison and is what allowed him to now be elected again. And he is now president of Brazil again, undoing the U.S.-backed coup that put Bolsonaro in. But in the case of Ecuador, Rafael Correa was taken out with the help of lawfare. And to continue from the Gray Zone, recently leaked secret chats obtained by Gray Zone expose how Ecuadorian prosecutor Diana Salazar leaked information to a subject of an ongoing investigation, undermining the prosecution of associates of Ecuador's current and previous U.S.-aligned presidents. So apparently the U.S. and U.S.-linked prosecutors are also getting in the way of prosecution of U.S.-backed candidates or U.S.-backed rulers. To continue from Gray Zone, they acted hand in glove. She acted hand in glove with the United States government, which essentially selected and controlled prosecutions from Washington. The shocking revelations of corruption and U.S. meddling in the geopolitically crucial South American nation have been largely ignored by the U.S. government and corporate media outlets. Well, that's the other thing is, U.S. media will often cover when there's a coup going on. They won't call it a coup, right? They'll call it a just revolution. Like when they tried to create a coup in Venezuela, the U.S. media covered that. When Correa was pushed out, U.S. media covered that a little bit. When Lula was prosecuted, U.S. media covers that. They almost never or rarely do they cover the undoing of these coups or the revelations about what was behind these coups or the revelations of the U.S. Influence on these coups. That stuff gets left out. So, anyway, these you can go and read more or watch more about what went on in Ecuador with the prosecutor there. But why, and I know so many of you are so well informed on this stuff. You probably know many of the reasons that the U.S. wants to coup Latin American countries, but here I'll let one of the tops of the Pentagon, Laura Richardson, speak about it. She's the commander of the U.S. She's the top of the U.S. Southern Command, which is Latin American Command, and I'll just let her share her thoughts on what the U.S. Pentagon feels about Latin America.
If I talk to my number two adversary in the region, Russia, I've got, of course, the countries, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua with Russia relationships. But why this region matters with all of its rich resources and rare earth elements. You've got the lithium triangle, which is needed for technology today. 60% of the world's lithium is in the lithium triangle: Argentina, Bolivia, Chile. You just have the largest oil reserves, light sweet crude, discovered off of Guyana over a year ago.
By the way, did you see the drool drop out of her mouth when she said light sweet crude? Light sweet crude. And when she's saying off of Guyana, but most of it's Venezuela, owned by Venezuela, which is why the U.S. wants to take out Venezuela.
You have Venezuela's resources as well with oil, copper, gold. We have the Amazon, lungs of the world. We have 31% of the world's fresh water in this region too. It's just off the charts. We have a lot to do. This region matters. It has a lot to do with national security, and we need to step up our game.
A lot to do with national security. You just listed everything you wanted to rob from Latin America. And she's like, and you know what? It just helps it just helps our national security to steal all that stuff. Oh God, they're so psychopathic. She also mentions that the Amazon is the lungs of the world while basically putting it in a list of things that need to be exploited or stolen. So if you steal the Amazon, whether it's the fresh water there, whether it's the deforestation, stealing the lumber, whether it's stealing other minerals in the rainforest, it's no longer the lungs of the planet. It's only the lungs of the planet if you leave it alone and let it be the lungs of the planet. You piece of human garbage. She mentioned the lithium, and she mentioned the light, sweet crude. I mean, didn't that sound like an OnlyFans moment there? Light, sweet crude. Let me tell you about the light, sweet crude we got going on down there. Oh, what a sociopath. So, yes, there is. I showed you that great animation the other day of just how much oil Venezuela has. And it's unbelievably more than even like Saudi Arabia. 303 billion barrels. It's way more than the US, way more than Saudi Arabia, way more than all of these places that you think have a lot of oil. Venezuela's got way more than that. And so the US wants to steal it, but the US also just wants to make sure it never gets sold outside of the petrodollar, because that would destroy the petrodollar. And here is good old friend of the show, Eric Prince. I'm kidding. But Eric Prince, former head of Blackwater, which then when they were, being prosecuted for a slaughter that killed numerous people, they changed their name to Z, and then they changed their name to Academy. And now I think they've been sold to someone else. But Eric Prince just creates one death squad after another. And here he is just the other day saying he's with the people of Venezuela as they try and coup their government.
Venezuela, resiste juntos por la libertad, la unidad y la paz. My friends, be well today with the protests. I wish you peace and safety. Your friends from the north, though we're not with you today, we're coming soon. We support you to the end.
Dude, it's like seeing a mafia hitman who's like, hey, listen, those of you, the Little Italy down there down the village, I'm not there at the moment, but I'll be there soon. It's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. He also is starting to, as he ages, starting to look a little like Dracula, which I think is pretty accurate. But you got to ask yourself, okay, so you got Eric Prince. He's created multiple death squads. That's like his bread and butter. Various kinds of death squads, etc. What would be his why would he even be interested in Venezuela? There's a lot of countries, there's like 200 countries in the world. Why is he sending message to Venezuela? Oh, because the US is more likely to hire mercenaries to go into Venezuela than they are to hire mercenaries to go somewhere else. Venezuela is like primed to have mercenaries sent there by the US or by a middleman. And of course, that's already happened once. It wasn't Eric Prince's mercenaries. It was that other lunatic who had the Bay of Piglets invasion, which people ended up calling it. And in which they, I don't remember the exact number, but many of them tried to invade Venezuela. It was several mercenaries, including I think 3 U.S. mercenaries under Trump administration, tried to invade Venezuela, were caught before they even got into Venezuela. They were like in the islands off Venezuela, and they were some were shot and killed, and others were arrested. But so here's Eric Prince wishing you a good coup d'etat that the U.S. is trying to push. And that has not stopped, by the way. The U.S.-backed attack on the electrical grid in Venezuela just happened the other day. It keeps going because we're trying to get that light, sweet crude. Okay, last story here real quick. And for those of you new to the show, I do this 4 times a week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, usually at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. I had no choice but to start an hour late today. But so I will see you Thursday next, and that should be at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. I also have Government Secrets tomorrow at the same time, I believe, 3 p.m. Eastern. That's on my YouTube channel. But anyway, let's get to the last story, which unfortunately is about another hero getting arrested for being a hero. Seems like we're getting more and more of these. Sea Shepherd founder Paul Watson has been arrested in Denmark, by Denmark and Greenland, to possibly be extradited to Japan so that he can be prosecuted for trying to stop Japan from murdering whales, because murdering whales is illegal under international law, but Japan keeps doing it by saying they're doing it for research. We're just researching how a lot of whales taste. We're just researching how all of these whales we're killing can be turned into boner medicine or whatever the hell they make it into. But most of you know who this guy is. They even had a reality show for a while called Whale Wars, which they followed him and his crew. And think about what this guy has achieved to harangue and harass for, I don't know, it's probably been 20 years or something, these whalers, these illegal whalers. Think about how tough that is to do. They are out in the oceans in the middle of nowhere. Imagine if you right now were like, I want to stop the Japanese whalers. How would you even begin to go about it? Like the amount of know-how and ships and crew and money that would be involved in chasing people across the open ocean. And so what they would do, if you ever, I haven't watched, I remember watching the reality show like 10 years ago or something. So I don't remember much of it, but I watched a few episodes. But what they do is they chase these boats around. The boats are far bigger than theirs, usually. And they just get in their way. They just make it difficult because the boat largely does not want to be seen doing the whaling. So they, when they're being tracked and followed, they largely have to stop, and they would just get in their way. They would do things that are, not deadly, like fire water at them and fire stink bombs onto their ship and all kinds of other shit, like just, like a feces cannon or something. I don't actually remember all of them, but it was hilarious also. But it's just like, I love creative activism. I love we're just shooting dog shit at Japanese whalers. Oh man. I feel like I miss my calling. I feel like shooting dog shit at Japanese whalers is probably what I should be doing right now. I feel I shoot dog shit at corporate ruling elite is what I do, but it's verbal dog shit. But anyway, they've now arrested him. Denmark is going along with this. Who knows what Japan has given Denmark in order to achieve this. But anti-whaling activist Paul Watson has said that authorities in Tokyo are seeking to make an example of him, much like Julian Assange, as he awaits a possible extradition to Japan, but he's in detention in a Greenland prison. The 73-year-old U.S.-Canadian campaigner said his time behind bars has not prevented him from continuing his fight to save the whales. Watson was arrested in July in the capital of the autonomous Danish territory of Greenland. Do you remember, side note, do you remember when Trump tried to buy Greenland from Denmark? And Denmark was like, here's an idea, go fuck yourself. And then Trump acted like he was going to do it anyway. And Greenland was like, no, you're really not. Thank you, Kelly, for the donation. Solidarity. Japan is They arrested him on a 2012 Interpol arrest warrant. 2012 Interpol arrest warrant issued by Japan, which accuses him of causing damage to one of its whaling ships in 2010 in the Arctic. So it's a 14-year-old incident that they're claiming caused damage to the whaling ship. And legit, they claim that some of the Japanese crew was injured with a stink bomb that landed on their ship. Does injured mean they ended up stinky? Because I feel like probably what happened is they just ended up stinky. And you're acting like that's an injury. They're now handicapped. They're disabled because they smell foul. They smell like old asparagus now for the rest of their lives. And their family members won't get near them. And you just don't understand. Japan has asked Denmark to extradite him to face trial. Watson is being held behind bars, waiting the government's decision. They want to set an example of him for others not to mess with their whaling, not to get in the way of their whaling, which is illegal under international law, but they just keep saying they're doing it for research, which is legal. So you can murder the largest, most majestic motherfucking animals on the planet as long as you're doing it for research. We're researching. And isn't it interesting? You'd think if you were researching something about whales, you'd probably need to kill, one? Because they're very big. So that's a lot to work with. So if you killed one whale, you'd have enough. You could research everything about that whale. And you'd have a lot to work with. It's not like a mite or something. You're like, I had to kill 1,000 just to get a sample. So yet they apparently, the only way they can do the research is to just kill dozens and dozens and dozens of these whales. So if you find any way, folks, to yell at the Danish government, scream at them not to extradite him. If any of you are in Denmark or have citizenship there and can scream at your lawmakers to free this man who has done nothing but try and stop illegal whaling, then that would be awesome. But don't forget, this episode did have some good news. 10,000 hotel workers are standing up for their rights and for better pay. You've got Israelis protesting against their government. A lot of important, great things are happening across this world. The energy is there. Just don't let them divide and conquer. Stand up and fight for each other. And, if the bottom 90% of us would have put our differences aside and say, I don't care who you voted for, because a lot of voting doesn't even matter. Our elections are decided by what? A few 100,000 people in a tiny areas of battleground states. If you put those aside and actually work together, they couldn't stop us. We could change these systems overnight. All right. I will see you tomorrow for Government Secrets. That's at youtube.com/momentofclarity. And I will see you Thursday for another episode of Dangerous Ideas. And keep fighting.